You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 FM and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in absolutely overcast and gray Northport, Florida. And I don't get to say that very often, but the weather has actually kind of been kind of nice with the overcast because we're not sweating to death right now. It is a little sticky and humid at times, but I think we'll all take that. If you're out on 75, just slow her down. Season kind of ended, but it's still busy out there. You've got a lot of people zipping in and zipping out, and there's nothing like 6 months in ICU if you're driving stupid. Think of other people too, because it only takes a half a second to kill somebody or put somebody in the hospital that you don't even know. So just be careful out on 75. I use the rule of thumb: if you're on 75, do less than 80. If you can keep it under 80, then you're probably in good shape. But I've got two really, really special guests in the house today who are going to educate us on multiple topics and try to get people involved in these topics. And they're really good stewards of our community. And I'm going to bring on Brian because he's been a past guest, and then we'll let Carmine introduce himself. But Brian, go ahead.
Thanks, John. Appreciate being here again. So I'm here representing Northport Forward, which is a nonprofit organization here in Northport that is looking to be the go-between between our citizens and our city officials, if you will. And here's our mission statement on the screen, which is to engage, inform, and educate citizens in partnership with city government and other or community organizations that have the same sort of drive. So today, wanted to get together and talk about, once again, Warm Mineral Springs and the latest developments on that. There was a vote here recently. And Carmine Miranda is going to talk about water and sewer, which I know is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts these days.
Well, and I got to tell you, I think we got two really hot topics. They seem to be pushing themselves to the forefront within the community and on all different levels. But Carmine, go ahead and introduce yourself, give a little background, because this is really your first time on the show, and just tell us what you're all about.
Thank you, John, for having me on your show. I'm a peer board member with Brian on Northport Forward. I've moved here 8 years ago. We love the city. We feel that there are things that we can do to improve, and trying to work with Northport Forward to educate the citizens versus them getting information on some of the social media sites, which may be misinformation. So we want to make sure that we get the facts out to the public. Just to let you know, Northport Forward is not political. We have no stance. Water and sewer plans being discussed today. And you know what our mission is. And we'll go from there.
And where are we at in as far as Northport Forward? I know you're really trying to drive correct information out and get people involved at any level that they're at, really, and just get people to participate. How is that going right now?
Well, it's kind of slow going because of the pandemic that really, put us behind. We are attracting new people, as you can see on the Facebook page. We're getting many likes, and people are reading the information. We're working feverishly to get a newsletter out and also to update the website so that we can put accurate information out there. And the purpose of that, try to put it out in the most concise form that we can, because we have a lot of residents who are out working a job or possibly two, have families to take care of. They don't have the time to sit and look at all the different sources of information that are out there. It could be 3 or 4 hours an evening, and they just don't have that time. Nope. And if we put, executive summary capturing the details, that they can stay abreast of what's going on in our city and understand truly what is meant by, this septic to sewer or this water and sewer conversion, or even Warm Mineral Springs, we feel that we would be a tremendous help to our community.
So I'm going to ask you, what have you done in the past? What was your career in the past?
My career, I come from New Jersey. I worked for a small computer company, you probably heard of it, IBM,
Yep.
for 37 years in service delivery, service management capacities. When I moved down here, shortly after moving down here, I was still employed, but I up in IBM's resource actions after 37 years, and I consider myself very lucky. So I'm retired, and I've planned all my life to be prepared to retire, and I have a vested interest in how the city is operating and literally spending our money because I've worked hard to do what I need to do. I don't want to stay away.
So in your move from New Jersey, and this is going to help even in our conversations, in your move down 8 years ago, our government here is more than likely a lot different than the government that you were dealing with or that you had to deal with up in Jersey. Can you explain the difference and how that kind of walks through everything?
From a Northport forward standpoint, I'm not going to discuss political.
No, I'm not really gearing it towards political. I'm gearing it more towards what are the differences in what you dealt with up there versus the style of government we have here?
That's kind of hard to put into context at this point. It's I'm happy to be here.
But it's a different animal.
It really is. We looked for the climate. We looked for a tax-free state. I felt Jersey that I had the government's or the local government's hands in my pocket. Here, I feel that between the weather and the no state tax, and we're able, when we first came down here driving around, we were able to literally see the things that were being done. I mean, the improvements, the roads are much. So you don't feel bad paying taxes. I mean, nobody likes to, but you don't feel bad paying taxes when you physically can see the improvements that are being made.
All right. Oh, that's a great answer because you're moving down 8 years ago, and there are customers moving in like crazy right now who just assume the government operates the same way, and that's the value of what Northport Forward brings to even the newer consumers. Is it's a really quick way to go in and really get a quick update without having to dig and do research on all these topics. And that's kind of why I went there with the government question, is not really to find out where you are politically, because it doesn't really matter. What you're trying to do is stir up enough interest in topics to get people to hit the website, to get involved, maybe make a phone call, and start participating. Because it's the one thing you and I and Brian, we can honestly say is we have got to find a way to get the citizens in Northport who work every day, who spend most of their time away from home, and then come home to their families. We've got to find a way to streamline the information to them so they understand what's happening around them versus what we have now, which is a really poor turnout for vote. And I think that's half the reason that we have the turnout like we do is people really aren't aware because they don't have time. And before Northport Forward, I'm not sure where they were going to dig up this information because it's too much, like you said, it's too much time. So I appreciate how you said it. I appreciate you going and talking about your background. Brian, let's talk a little bit about Warm Mineral Springs and what's happening there.
Sure. I just wanted to add to that last point that I had a busy career myself. I'm sure Carmine is can say the same thing, that, his job kept him busy for most of his time. And when he wasn't working, he probably had family at the top of the list. And, until I moved down here about 18 months ago, I worked morning, noon, afternoon, evening, all the time. And so now that I'm retired, I've got time to look into the things that are of interest to me. And to your point, I understand that people don't have time to dig into this stuff, but they really should understand what's happening in their city. And so I figured, when I joined Northport Forward, it was going to be part of getting the word out, not just to everybody else, but also to myself. I mean, I'm a citizen here as well, and I want to know what's going on in my city and where are my tax dollars being spent, and is it something that I agree with? So I'm making that assumption that there are many, many more people in Northport that have the same types of questions, and if I can be part of the mechanism to communicate those things to them, then that's what I want to do. And I know Carmine too, same thing. So.
Great answer.
Warm Minerals.
Go ahead.
Sure. Warm Mineral Springs. Last time, I feel like we're on one of those old radio mystery shows. Last time we spoke, there was a meeting, April 13th, where Warm Mineral Springs funding was discussed. And it was said at that time, well, the commissioners wanted to, at least some of them, wanted to move it forward to have a funding workshop. And so that's what was done. And then it turned out to be a special meeting because it changed from a workshop to a special meeting in order to allow voting to occur during that meeting, as far as approving the funding or not. So June 4th was the funding special meeting. And let's see. So I wanted to say what was covered, and it was a budget discussion and commission vote. So there was two parts. There's a discussion and possible action regarding funding sources for construction of Warm Mineral Springs Park building restoration, utility infrastructure, and parking lot improvements. So those three things are what is considered as phase one in Warm Mineral Springs funding. And then there was a part two, which was discussion and possible action regarding future phases of the Warm Mineral Springs master plan. It does mention master plan, but the references that I've been looking at, it seems like there's a different take on what phase 1, 2, 3, and so forth really are. And so right now, I think all we can say is that phase 1 are those three things, which is building restoration, utility infrastructure, and parking lot improvements. I've got some slides up on my screen here that I'm trying to use as cheat sheets. So if we remember that the master plan and all of its phases comes at a cost of $19.7 million estimated. And phase 1, with those three items, is estimated to cost $9.2 million. So you can see that phase 1 is as substantial as the other subsequent phases in and of itself. With the building renovation and so forth, these are major investments. So the way that the city is going about funding phase 1 is by using surtax. And the way that they're going about doing that is the commission had asked the Parks and Rec folks to come up with some projects that are currently allocated as surtax projects, and to put them in a list to try to come up with enough money by reallocating those Parks and Rec projects to the Warm Mineral Springs phase 1 project. So there's a few of projects that have been sitting for a while, and they actually came up with about $17 million in money from other projects. Obviously, that's not needed. They only need $9.2 million. There was a few of those projects that had stipulations that they needed to follow through on them, so they were taken off the list. So in the end, there was enough money here in these reallocation of surtax revenue projects to fund the Warm Mineral Springs. Now, there was, well, they did have a vote, and the vote was 3-2 to fund Warm Mineral Springs with the reallocated surtax money. And so I just wrote down, because I wanted to understand, what our commissioners were thinking as far as the reasons for supporting this funding the way that it is. And let's see, the three commissioners who voted to fund phase one with the surtax money made 2 points, really. Each of them had essentially the same 2 points, maybe varying degrees of each. But one was that the Warm Mineral Springs Park is currently, quote unquote, making money. And the second part is that they have a personal connection to the park and wanted to see the city maintain the control and operating control over the park. So those are the two reasons that the three commissioners voted for it. And the two commissioners that voted against this funding, their reasons had to do with fiscal responsibility. And by using the reallocated surtax money, they didn't think that that was the best use for that money. And there's also, they were looking at relief of the taxpayer burden. And those were the two main reasons that they had for voting against the funding with the surtax. Now, following that discussion, all five commissioners had stated that they were open to alternative means of funding for any future phases beyond phase one. So that could mean, anything from grants to a P3, public-private partnership arrangement, or some hybrid of that. They all stated that they were open to considering something other than more surtax spending on that park. And so, let's see.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Where you talked about the vote, it's public. Can you tell us who the commissioners were that voted for it?
Sure. Voting for funding with the surtax money were Mayor Luke, Commissioner White, Commissioner McDowell.
Okay.
And so voting against was Commissioner Emmerich and Commissioner Langdon.
And it's interesting because the dynamic within that core of five commissioners, the dynamic is usually leaning more towards the conservation side of argument versus a lot of the business side of argument. So to me, that's a dynamic that's playing out right there and within the vote. And I don't know if you're as concerned over the vote as I am, and others are as concerned about thinking the park is actually generating income. Because when you take the debt away, I've never run a business where you just cancel debt. You don't think there is debt. We paid for that piece of property. We have not recouped, according to everything I've heard, and I've interviewed commissioners, and they have stated on this show that there's a profit there. I don't understand how we have a profit if we haven't paid for the piece, we haven't paid for the repairs, we haven't paid for what we've now voted to go do, and we're still boasting about how we're in the black. We're definitely in the red.
Well,
so deep in red.
And it kind of continues with this approach too, because not a lot of details, but at least some references to multiple funds of money being used to do different, to handle different expenses associated with Warm Mineral Springs. And, this got me thinking to the point where I spoke to someone about maybe doing some kind of forensic analysis of this, business model, which, in reality would take me years to do and probably wouldn't give me all the details that I would need to put a complete picture together. So right away, it tells me that this is a little bit misleading, if you will, when it comes to understanding how this park is paid for. And so, I think we need to know, I think we should know, where the money comes from, because to say that there's a profit is really putting a happy face on this without really putting any details. And to vote to spend $9.2 million on phase one without a business plan saying this is what our expense is going to be going forward, and this is what our expected revenues are going to be going forward to cover those expenses, as well as a plan to maintenance and upgrades and renovations over the years. I mean, all we have is an extension of what we currently have, which is, a park operating in the red, but promoting itself as being in the black.
Right.
So that's a bit concerning.
Well, and you guys are both business guys, so I'm going to approach this with a little bit of logic, and it's a pretty simple question. And Carmine, you can jump in because I think you'll tend to agree. If anyone that owns a business in Northport were to run their business like this, it wouldn't exist. They would go bankrupt. You can't sustain what they're doing on paper. It's almost like a fictitious story. And I'm saying that because I've talked to both sides. This is not a personal opinion. This is just listening to both sides and understanding that they're not really representing the numbers as true fact when it comes to a business model. And you use that word. Carmine, do you have some insight to how you feel on this topic and where you think things should go?
Well, I know in my past career, before we were able to put any project, we had, concept sections. We've had business cases that got scrutinized by accountants in the company, sure that what we were doing would have some ROI attached to it. You don't run a business by just spending money and then, putting your finger up and thinking that you're going to be successful. There are plans that are in place, proven plans. Business people look at plans and that's how you run a business.
Right.
So I don't agree with, it's almost like it seems to be like a cover up. It needs to be out in the open and having maybe a forensic audit of what's been going on, and really what's been spent behind the scenes. Because if it's a park, our utilities people are cutting the grass. That costs money. We're paying them. We're paying for gas. We're paying for the wear and tear on the equipment. So that all needs to be factored in. And a lot of the citizens, when they hear what's being said that this is making money, some of them don't know any better and say, okay, yes, that's happening. And some of them that are ex-business people, retired business people, they're not buying it.
Well, and I would dare say that if your normal everyday working Joe in Northport, which we have many, that are not business owners, but they're blue collar guys, and maybe a lot of them are blue collar business guys, running their businesses out of their house. If you run a profit and none of the expenditures come off, you feel really good at the end of the week. But, I don't even know that there's a business model like that. You talked about forensic. Both of you talked about forensic. I, I'm a little lost, and even at that point when we can't put simple numbers on a piece of paper before we do the forensic analysis, because I don't know that the actual number is true, that we're making any money, because nobody's really put the all the expenditures down on a piece of paper and then all the profits next to each other. Because the first thing I think of is I'm buying a business. Well, if I'm buying a business from Carmine and it's in the hole, well, I run my business differently. I'm buying that business for you and it's in the hole, but I now own the business that's in the hole. So now I'm making profit. Well, if it's in the hole, you're buying a business that's in the hole. It doesn't matter. And that's really what we just did. We bought Warm Middle Springs that was already kind of falling apart because the prior owner didn't put any maintenance into it. None. He just wrung it dry. I'm not saying we should, and I know you guys are not saying that we should shut the park down and bulldoze it in, but there has got to be some really good, I think, common sense conversation about what's going on. And I'm glad you guys are pushing buttons to have that happen. Go ahead, Brian. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no. So we started out $5.5 million in the hole, right? To your analogy about being in the hole, and now we're going to add $9.2 million to that hole, and so there was a question asked: well, how much profit, if you will, are we making with Warm Middle Springs? And there was the answer from, and I don't remember who the city employee was, but it was from $300,000 to $400,000 a year profit. Now, all depending on how you define profit, but right. That's what it was. And so, it does appear that there is some money left over after things are paid for. But I'm not sure whether that accounts for, like Carmine said, someone's going to cut the grass. There is maintenance happening out there outside of, just the everyday business. There is a company operating Warm Mineral Springs at $49,500 and something a month. But I don't believe that they handle any repairs or maintenance of the building. I could be wrong, and I'm certainly willing to look at information if someone would provide that. But there are expenses that are, I'll say hidden, and I don't mean that on purpose. I mean that they're hidden because they're not obvious, because they're handled by multiple budgets and funds, so to speak. Right. But to get on board with this, I really would have appreciated seeing some plan laid out that said, this is what we're going to do to the park. And we're going to do this because it needs to be done, one, so the buildings don't fall down. And two, we're going to increase revenues by doing A, B, and C. And I'd love to see what A, B, and C are, and how A, B, and C are going to be operated, and what kinds of revenues we're going to be taking in from them, and what kind of expenses are going to be associated with those new sources of revenue. And looking at the Warm Mineral Springs master plan, the only thing that I could find that really talked about expenses was the addition of another grounds person and another person, I think, to stand in the cyclorama area. So you had two new employees that would need to be paid for. I think one of them was at $83,000 a year. And so, those expenses have to be covered somehow. And I just don't know, in my mind, how new glass, new paint, and that sort of thing of getting the building looking right and, structurally sound, how that is going to increase attendance. Now, I understand that the cafe is going to be built out again and made operational, and that the spa services are going to have an update, but the spa services are in place today. So really, we're just talking about a cafe that's going to be operating again. So I don't know if that's going to cover everything that needs to be taken care of from an expense standpoint. I really would love to see that broken out, and I haven't had even an inkling of a clue as to who would provide that. But it would be nice. It'd be a comfort to know that $9.2 million in surtax is going towards something that is not going to just throw it in the spring and watch it wash down the creek, so to speak.
If you say something so many times and you say it loud enough, you can convince people that of anything. You can, especially when people are detached from their own government within their city. And I got to believe that that's part of the issue with voting right now is you have an active block of people who actively are pushing an agenda, and the rest of the city is numb to what's going on because their lives are at such a brisk pace that they're not paying attention to all of these things. Carmine, I see you shaking your head. I know that this is a hot topic. It is steaming hot at times. Do you feel like?
Well, let me say one thing before we go to Carmine. So I want to say that my interest here really isn't about the health and wellness side of Warm Mineral Springs. I understand that that's there. And I understand that there are people who go there just for that. My interest is more of an overall economic development standpoint, because that's why we bought Warm Mineral Springs in the first place, was to have that opportunity to develop that into something that's going to help our city. And if it's not going to be helping our city from a health and wellness, then it must have been meant to help our city from a tax base, maybe, or increasing the number of quality jobs that are here in the city. And so, I want to make sure that that's understood. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not just looking at this as a park. I'm looking at it from original intent and where it is today, and how much is this park going to cost us in the future. Sorry, Carmine, if you want to add to that.
Great point. Go ahead, Carmine.
John, when I was shaking my head, I was thinking about the voting. I mean, we only have maybe 12% of the city coming out to vote. So that kind of proves that people are their lives. They're working 1 or 2 jobs. They have children's activities that they have to attend to. There really isn't enough time in each day, and they don't know the issues. And hopefully that's what we're going to try and do. I think from an accounting, I think the way the city looks at this falls under several different line items within a budget. So you have your utilities people, cutting the grass and stuff, that's under the utilities budget. They don't treat this like it's a business where you have, your assets and your liability and profit, and you have an accountant that comes in and you pay taxes based on that, and you figure out what your profit is. You've got salaries to consider, healthcare to consider, and the city has that, but it's all broken out in the master budget, all the different line items. You got your workers' salaries, you've got your healthcare, you've utilities department. So it's not in one place that you can physically look at and say, oh yeah, this is making money. No, this is losing money.
So I want to ask this question because creative financing is kind of written all over this right now. And people do creative financing at home all day long, especially people who are working class. They pull funds, they maneuver things, but they never relieve debt. They're just shifting funds. We're shifting funds, but we're not even counting the debt. We're not even being honest and upfront with a number, because we're yelling we're profitable when we've got $14 million unaccounted for, basically on the we're profitable number. If we're profitable, then why do they need to borrow or get the 9 point, what is it, 9.2?
2.
9.2 million. If you're that profitable, I guess you could yell and scream and holler that, yeah, we can use this money, but we're going to put that money back. Well, I've not heard anybody talking about doing anything like that.
No, and the thing that kind of that got me revved up about Warm Mineral Springs also is that, there are some things that the city must do infrastructure-wise that only the city can do, but running Warm Mineral Springs and developing Warm Mineral Springs Park is not one of them. That's something that can be done in partnership with someone else with zero tax dollars being spent on it. And that was not the decision made. And that's so, that's fine. So I would really love to see the numbers come back, because I think when you get it down to it, people might get involved when they see how much of their money coming out of their wallet was spent on a park that they don't even go to, maybe don't even know it exists. I've met people here in Northport, multiple decade residents, who were not quite really aware that there was a park over there. So that's a little bit disturbing to me.
I might be scary with this number, but I believe that less than 5% of Northport even goes to that park.
Yeah, I think it's a much smaller number than that, John, because I did some back of the envelope math, and they sell passes there to Sarasota County residents and non-Sarasota County residents. So we can't even tell how many are international, or how many come from out of the county, or how many are coming from Northport. But when you I looked at the numbers for individual passes at the Sarasota County level and group passes, and I came up with a number of about 4,000 and something in Sarasota County, 4,000 in the county. So how many of those from Northport? Well, in my discussions with an employee there, it was told to me that, an estimated about 100 people are regulars from the area. So less than 4,000 people from Northport for sure.
It's amazing how they pushed that vote through, isn't it?
Well, it becomes a very emotional driven topic, and I took note of this, and I actually mentioned it during the June 4th meeting when I got up to speak to the commission, that this was an emotionally driven decision. And I referenced, here's some of the quotes that I went back to the recording. Surtax, we shuffle it around all the time anyway, Mayor Luke. I don't know as people value things unless they participate in that thing. That's Mayor Luke. Phase 1 is vitally important to me. It's Mayor Luke. And I don't doubt any of these things to be true. They are true. I just don't think that that's how we should be running the city. I think that there should be a fiscally minded approach to where we spend money and how we spend money, because we're spending money, my money, Carmine's money, other people's money. And I guess that's where it gets down to, is other people's money. So if I ran a small business and I didn't have to be accountable for getting my books to tally up in the end of the year, and it wasn't my money, I don't know. Would I be as diligent about it?
No,
Something to think about.
I would like to find one business, true business, that runs numbers like we're discussing on the show. And I'm going to throw it out there to any city leaders. And there's 5 of them. City manager, you want to come on and explain the budget? I'm all about that. I can promise you that I'm going to have Vanessa on the first Friday of the month, ex-city commissioner, who will absolutely tell you that park is not operating in the black, without question. And she just might have the history in her head and her heart about how it came about and what it was supposed to be about. And I think we're not listening. I think the emotion of the park is now at a frenzy versus common cooling down and a good structured approach. I think we're tired of Band-Aids. We've been putting Band-Aids on that since we bought it. Okay. Am I a fan of it? Sure. I think it's a great piece if utilized the right way. And when that was presented back then, it has nothing to do with what they're talking about doing with it today. And I'm not sure. Maybe they need to sell off some of the park land. And I hate to even talk like this because I like our Parks and Rec. I have them on my show, but
Yep.
What do you do to fix the money issue? The easiest way is to sell some other park pieces and maybe turn those into some business opportunities. I don't know.
Well, go ahead.
Usually the parks, if you have a good economic development plan where you have a good mix of residential and commercial that are actually paying the bills and keeping the city in the black, you can afford to put parks out there and you can afford to put the expenses into it because that's something for the people. We are doing that with the parks, and we have a very bad mix of maybe 93% residential and 7% commercial, and that has to change. And that Camoins feasibility study talks directly to that. And if there's three what they call opportunity areas, okay, Sumter, Toledo Blade, and the Springs is listed as another. But if you do those things and you put, again, water and sewer to attract people and businesses to come here, you're relieving some of the burden of the taxpayers. You now have money in the coffers that you can do some of the stuff for the parks. So right. I hate to see the parks be taken away because it's, people work all the time. You need some relief. So the parks are great, but do the right things on that dais and right corporations in here. Get the right commercial in here that's going to offset and make.
Just bringing in a business doesn't automatically make the park go away. You can have the same goals with the park and to have someone else, come in and make those changes and develop it and be able to make a profit while at the same time offering exactly what the people of Northport wanted and all those meetings that they had. I mean, that's fine, but there's got to be a plan with that. And I really would like to leave it there. And if we spend the $9.2 million of surtax money on this park, fine. But let's take the next phases and make them something that we can actually get our teeth into from a tax standpoint where it's not going to be a burden to the taxpayer. And so before we run out of time today, John, because this is the fastest hour on radio.
It is.
I'd like to give some time to Carmine because, water and sewer is something that is extremely important because one, it's extremely expensive and it's a hot button, as you mentioned earlier, with most of the people in this city. So Carmine, you want to give an overview on that?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Like I said earlier, taking a stance on, for or against it. Each of us in Northport Forward as individuals naturally have an opinion about it. But this is the overview from a Northport Forward standpoint as far as giving fact-based information to the people and trying to put it in an executive summary so they can have it and they can see it and they don't have to spend much time. Water, when we talk water and sewer, it's really about water. It's not really about sewer because water is the key element here. Okay, water is the most precious resource. One, our survival depends on it, our livelihoods depend on it, and our tourism dollars depend on it. So, with water and sewer, there really isn't a single one-size-fits-all answer because there are many, many facets to this to consider.
Right.
Now, I've looked at newspaper articles. I've gathered information from the Tallahassee Clean Waterways Act, several bills that have been put out, the House bill, the Senate bill, the executive order, and then the new one, Section 404, which, the components of it, they're finally looking like they're going to do something, which is a great position to be in. Hopefully, he'll follow through with it. We have the city master plan that they developed in December of the past year, and they're spending money to do phase one, to bring water and sewer in. They're looking at the design aspect of it. That's going to take 18 to 24 months to do. And then once they come forward with the design to the commission, Northport needs to come up with the additional funding before we can proceed with the construction phase of it. So that's, again, another consideration. Where are we going to be getting the money? The total timeline for the construction phase is another 18 to 24 months. So you're looking at a total of 4 years with a total bill of about $30 million for that phase one. So yes, it is highly expensive. They're talking about homeowners costing anywhere from $12,000 to $22,000. We've heard numbers from $15,000 to $30,000. The city has to do a better job in going after thing, and that's why they're investing this money and getting the design, because that'll help figure out what funding is available, what grants are available to offload some of this, so the burden isn't fully on the taxpayers. I've compiled, a list of, issues, if you will, or concerns that people have. The residents basically they're concerned with the $15,000 to $30,000 tab to hook up. They're perfectly content with their septic and well situation. The age of the septic comes into play. If it's old and it's going to need to be replaced, there's not so much pushback. But if this thing is only a year or two, there's going to be plenty of pushback. They don't want to be spending that money. A lot of them are concerned about, how the city is going to handle this. Are you going to put a tax lien on my house if I choose to afford this and I want to sell my home? Am I going to be able to satisfy that lien and then leave? So there's a lot of discussion that needs to take place. A lot of people are requesting now, and this makes perfect sense. We're going by numbers that are coming from the government. Port Charlotte themselves have been doing testing, and the citizens want the testing to be done on the canals and waterways like the Cocoa Plum here in Northport to really figure out what percent is the septic impact against the nutrient discharge versus fertilizer levels. Okay, so this is something that I think should be done. Different questions, and the citizens are also complaining because they're saying you're coming after our septic. You want us to spend this kind of money, but you're not doing anything about the piney points or the mosaics or even the Army Corps of Engineers with large discharges that come down the Calahoosahatchee River that are causing much of this problem, probably a percentage of it. So yes, I agree with that. But yes, there's a lot of information that needs to be looked at. There's a lot of moving parts to all of it. So the understanding is that the city is taking action to start doing some testing in the Cocoa Plum. Also, in this past Wednesday's paper, the Charlotte County Water Quality Manager, Brandon, met with their commissioners, and they're actually pushing to have Cocoa Plum tested, because that Cocoa Plum waterway drains into the Charlotte County waterway. In particular, they call it the Como waterway. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of money we're talking about.
So Carmine, so this is something that you're going to stay on top of as part of Northport Forward, right? And
yes,
and put together maybe an ongoing newsletter that keeps it updated with where we're at.
Yes, the intention is to put information that I have, executive summary, out on our website so people can actually see it and view it. I've learned some stuff today, which is very interesting. Coming from Georgia, there are 2 tributaries of water coming from there, and it affects the Apalachicola River and Bay that comes into the Panhandle, which terminates in the Gulf. But what has happened is Georgia, they have what we call harmful upstream water use practices, and it's having adverse effects on, as cited in the Clean Waterways Act. What happened was that the Supreme Court on April 1st of this year ruled against Florida, because what's happened is the Army Corps of Engineers back in 2017 having upstream consumption from Georgia by having them hold the river water, okay, which is they're building dams to block it, and it's affecting the ecological and hydroelectric and our water supply. So yes, we will be putting this out, and I'll be staying on top of it, and later as well.
Well, can you do me a favor, because I know that like I said, these were 2 extremely hot topics, and they're just not gonna stay quiet. They're going to get some momentum. If they're not already, there's momentum being gained, because you guys are extremely active on getting information out. You're extremely active now because COVID is gone, on pushing this information to the consumer, so that they can, take 5 minutes and digest it. Where I don't know that prior to the vote that we could even say that 80% of the people digested anything that they were voting on. We need to get that number turned around, and we need people to understand how important it is to vote, along with the fact that you need to have knowledge about what you're voting for, and what our commissioners are actually voting for. I think they're on the show once a month, and I can't wait to have the next city commissioner on. I'm sure it's going to be entertaining. I've got Peter Bartolotta on the last Friday of the month. I'm sure that one's going to be crazy. Bill English, Chuck, I enjoyed lunch or breakfast this week. I can't wait for you to be on the show. I think he's got some great insight on a lot of things. Peter Bartolotta actually commented on the show. Others, please share this. You guys are fantastic. You're doing a great job. I can't wait to have you on again. We've got about 15 seconds. I just want to make sure that you get your website out.
Sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. It's northportforward.com is our website. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/northportforward/. So take a look at us. We're just getting started. And the way I look at it is how the city and the citizens deal with these 2 issues we've got right here is going to show a lot about how they're going to deal with everything else that's going on. So let's pay attention to what's happening and take control of our city. Thank you.
I just want to add real quick, John. Also, if anybody's interested in joining Northport Forward, we can use some good people. So please consider that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Everybody be safe out there. This is John Rawlings with WKDW saying thank you very much.